Šobrīd mēs esam gatavi dzirdēt viedokli par meža nozares iespējām un problēmām attiecībā uz Eiropas Savienības zaļo kursu no Marijas Pohjalas. Viņa ir Eiropas Meža īpašnieku konfederācijas pārstāve. Tātad citas valsts viedoklis, Somija. Lūdzu, Marija, floor is yours.
Thank you very much, and thank you for the invitation to give a presentation today. I will bring greetings from Brussels today. Before we are jumping into actual topics of the European Green Deal and its implementation to the Nordic and European forest sector, I'm just quickly going to present my organization first. So I represent CEPF, so Confederation of European Forest Owners. There are 16 million forest owners who I represent across the Europe, and they all together own approximately 60% of the whole forest area. So I'm representing private forest owners. So there are families, men, women, children behind forests across the Europe, and they do active contributions to the climate, biodiversity, and also bioeconomy on a daily basis by managing their forest on a sustainable way. We have, in CEPF, we have 20 ordinary members from national confederations, and also 4 associated members which represent mostly like regional private forest owners. Some facts about European forest. So there are 182 million hectares of forest on an EU level, and there has been a significant growth in the past 25 years, both in the areas, meaning hectares, and also in the cubic meters. And approximately 90% of the EU wood industry supply comes from the EU forests. And about 8% of the manufacturing added value comes from the European forest sector. And it's a big contributor to the European jobs. Just a few words about Nordic Family Forestry Alliance, who I also present. So NSF, there's over 1 million forest owners in Sweden, Finland, Denmark, and Norway. And as you can see in the map, so Nordics have a lot of forests, so the pressure also from the European side is towards the Nordics as well. The key values that we promote in the European level are the sustainable forest management and multifunctionality of forest, also the property rights and subsidiarity, and of course the viability and profitability of the whole forest sector. Now I'm going to jump to the actual topic. So I will present you the Commission's key policy priorities since 2019 when the Commission entered force. So the Green Deal, as we have heard today already, many aspects of the Green Deal. So the aim is to contribute to the climate neutral EU by 2050, which should preserve the nature and also leave no one behind. This Green Deal, it touches upon many different policies, and from forestry perspective, there are a lot of new initiatives coming. Since 2019, every year there has been a lot of initiatives which also touch upon forestry, and they come, for instance, through climate policies, biodiversity policies, finance policies, just to mention a few. Now I'm going to present you in the 15 minutes the most relevant EU forest-related policies that we are working with and which Commission has mentioned that they will help to deliver the Green Deal objectives. There are both binding and non-binding regulations from forestry perspective. Some processes are still ongoing since many years. Some are already finalized. So if we start about non-binding legislation, we have forest strategy, biodiversity strategy, which are more like these overarching strategies, which will then consist of smaller actions and measures, and can end up being binding legislations at the end. I will now walk you through quickly the most relevant forest-related policies. I'll start with the EU Forest Strategy for 2030, which has been adopted last year in July. From our perspective, all of the most important aspects of sustainable forest management are part of this strategy, but we also have been disappointed to see that the concrete actions through the forest strategy, they show the imbalance of goals. For instance, economic and investment-related aspects are absent. As I said before, although these strategies are not binding at itself, they can result in binding measures. And some key actions that the Commission has indicated as the future forest-related policies are, for instance, to establish a closer to nature forest management certification scheme. There will also be a new set of indicators for sustainable forest management on the EU level. Commission has also mentioned that member states should strictly protect all the primary and old-growth forests. And also they are planning to, by next summer, to publish a monitoring and reporting legislation which should increase the knowledge of the state of the forest across Europe. Next to the forest strategy, we also have the biodiversity strategy, which is also non-binding at itself, but also has resulted already into concrete and binding actions. One of the overarching target is to protect 30% of the EU land and sea area and strictly present 10% of these areas. And this part of the strictly protected land, especially the primary and old-growth forest, should be protected. And also one of the new initiatives from what we're expecting from the Commission is to have guidelines on closer to nature forestry practices. This work is still ongoing. Then I will jump to one of the latest, at least on an EU level, at this stage most discussed binding legislative proposal, so Nature Restoration Regulation, which was published last summer, and it's now to be discussed in the European Parliament and EU Council. So what is the target of this? Is to restore habitats covered by the EU Habitats Directive, and it would mean that by 2050, 9% of all ecosystems, also forests, should show increasing trends for set of indicators. For instance, standing on line deadwood, age structure, forest connectivity, and also common forest birds index. We are having concerns related to nature restoration regulations since we do not know to which reference year we should restore our forests to. And of course, who are the ones that are financing this? We know that forest owners need to have support if they cannot use their forest on the level they used to in order, if they have to decrease their harvesting levels to do the restoration actions. So this is a very important topic to address to the decision makers, that who is financing all these activities. Then next important file we are following closely is the deforestation and forest degradation regulation, which is also a binding legislation. This has been proposed last year and it's now in the trilogue process, meaning that Commission, Parliament and Member States are having negotiations on this. So the aim is very good, and also just to state on a general level that usually the aims of the Commission are good, but not the measures, how they address forestry, because they want to go very much into details, how member states should manage their forest. So on deforestation regulation as well, the aim is good to tackle the deforestation, especially in the third countries, but meaning that if we put rules for the deforestation in third countries, it also brings new requirements for EU member states as well if they wish to bring wood-based material to the European markets. Although the process is still ongoing on the EU side, there has been proposals that, for instance, if you would change the tree species in your forest, this would be called as forest degradation, which is of course not something that we cannot support. We see that forest management should not be seen as a forest degradation and deforestation. Also, we have concerns related to cost of the geolocalization, meaning that Commission would like to have a very pricey due diligence system, meaning that forest owners should report very closely where each of the wood trunk is coming from. And this is not something that we want to see on a EU legislation. We see that there needs to be a compromise needed to make an ambitious target for geolocalization, but not go into details, because this will, of course, have a result in a lot of bureaucracy on the forest holding level as well. We just heard an excellent presentation on LULUCF, so there's not much to be added on LULUCF. So as we heard, this is part of the Fit for 55 package. It's in the trilogue negotiations right now. And since now there will be this new EU-wide carbon removal target for member states, we have concerns that bringing up this, that EU wants to establish these goals, that it will decrease the harvesting levels at some point. Part of this Fit for 55 package, we also have renewable energy directives, and we have also had excellent presentations today on this. And I think the most discussed aspect in this RED III directive is that the primary biomass, can it be accounted towards the renewable energy in the future as well? So the EU Parliament has proposed that the use of primary biomass should be capped, which we see that on this kind of geopolitical situation where we are facing energy crisis is not to be supported. We need all the energy from the sustainable sources that are now in the market, and we should not restrict it. European Commission has also proposed to have no-go areas for biomass sourcing, meaning that certain type of forest should not be part of the forest owners should not sell bioenergy from certain type of forest which have high biodiversity values, but the definition is still vague for us. So when we have discussions with EU decision makers, we always need to start from the beginning to tell that we don't use our forest just for energy, but it's just the one of the it's a natural process when we manage our forest regularly, that we also get a certain amount of biomass for energy. Then last but not least, a taxonomy regulation. It's interesting that EU says and Commission says that it doesn't have any common EU policy, but still it comes. It wants to influence the forest management through different initiatives, and taxonomy is a good example that also through a finance market regulation you can have criteria for actual forest management. So this is a regulation which is aiming to allocate money into green investments and sustainable finance. In order to do that, there is a classification system called taxonomy, which is establishing a list of environmentally sustainable economical activities. So this process is still partly ongoing. This is regulated through delegated acts, and one of the delegated acts is already on the implementing phase on a member state level, and whereas the second delegated act is still not agreed upon. But if according to the first decisions made, if forest holding wishes to be taxonomy compliant, meaning that it for instance wants to sell material to a forest industry company who wants to buy material that is taxonomy compliant, so it's which has like a green label, it should have, this forest holding should have a climate benefit analysis in place and also a forest management plan. But the second delegated act, as mentioned before, is still not agreed upon, but according to the first discussions on the EU level, these requirements will be even stricter for forest management and also very detailed. Then I will wrap up the slides presented. So what we see on a general trend on the EU level is that productive aspects and realities of forest management are usually overlooked in Green Deal related policies. And usually the increased forest sinks and conservation values, they are the main focus here, whereas the bioeconomy aspects and the sustainable forest management and the need of having active management, they are lacking. And although the EU says that it does not have a common EU forest policy, the implications to forestry, they still come through many other policy areas. As we saw in the slides, deforestation, sustainable finance, climate and energy, as well as biodiversity. And also this changing climate and geopolitical instability, it brings pressure to the Commission to implement the Green Deal as soon as possible. Although we have tried to break this a bit and say like, we should not make any decisions influencing the forestry sector at this kind of situation. And what could be the possible impacts of EU forest-related policies on a European and Nordic level? So for sure, if having a pressure to reducing the harvesting, so there at this in the future, there could be less available areas for wood supply. Of course, for forest owner, if he or she has to follow a precise reporting requirements in the future, this would also increase cost of management and harvesting. And of course, this will then have an influence for the whole supply chain and the products available. So this brings a lot of uncertainties for the whole sector and the investment environment, and of course for the forest holdings, profitability and jobs in general. What I have concerns about is that the impacts on the various policies, they have an negative impact on the forest owner's motivation to keep on managing their forest actively, and also they do not have enough engagement in the long-term management. And with this last picture, I just want to show you that if we are like forest owners are in the middle, and this is the EU environment that they are trying to cope with. So although we don't have any common forest policy, it still, for me, it shows quite well that that we in the future, maybe the Commission will admit that it has went a bit too far in terms of forest management. Thank you for your attention, and happy to take questions if you have.
Thank you, Maria. You have got some questions. Participants of the conference want to know your opinion. Why is it so in European Commission that representatives from countries with small forests are deciding on how to manage our land here in North, where we have a lot of forest? Why it's so?
So did I understand right that why Commission is having decisions on
representatives from countries with small forest are those who are making decisions about us, we can say. We have a lot of forest, different situation, and maybe they don't know exactly what is going on here in North, why it's so that they are the main who are making decisions. Maybe it's not so. What's your opinion?
Sorry, I still. So why are the Nordics making the decisions on forest?
No. Not Nordics. Not Nordics are making decisions about northern countries.
So others. Why are others making decisions on Nordic countries than they? Yeah, this is a good question.
Is it so?
Yes, it is so. I think Commission does not have enough trust on member states, and Nordics are unfortunately the ones they want to have a real influence on. They are convinced that the Nordic forest management is not sustainable, and they are trying to target them. And this is because of lack of knowledge on actual forest management and the structure of the forest sector, unfortunately.
Okay, thank you very much. And one more question. Could you tell more about the new European Union SFM indicators? What potential impact to forest owners these indicators will bring?
Yeah, we don't know about any specific details yet on this. But what we know is that the Commission wants to come up with a new definition for sustainable forest management. They see that the Helsinki resolution, which was agreed years ago on sustainable forest management, is not enough. And of course I have concerns that they will come up using the knowledge on forest management, which they do not have. They will come up with the indicators that are not cannot be used across the Europe. I think we should not make specific indicators for different locations. We should always take into account that forests are different across the Europe, so not to make any general specific indicators for sustainable forest management for the whole EU. But yeah, not details yet, but I just, of course, am skeptic how the Commission will achieve this target.
Okay. Thank you very much for your answers and your presentation. Thank you very much.